Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Office Line Generator project. Now I'm quickly just going to demo the finished project so that you can see what we're going to build. So here we can generate random office quotes with some information about when they were said and by who. And there are also going to be custom colors for this background that's going to spin depending on what character it is. So yeah, and we're also going to have an authentication mode that we can turn on. And if we have it on and we're not logged in, then we can't use the service. And if we log into a user that hasn't paid for a subscription, then we still can't use it. But if we log into a user that has paid for it, then we can use it. So this will just simulate adding authentication to this system. Now I'm quickly just going to go over the authentication flow of the system and about the different services and tools that we're going to use and some episode progression. And if you're not interested in that, then you can just skip ahead to the timecode that I have on the screen. So the system is going to use 3 components, 2 Docker containers, the first one containing our microservers with our very small API. And we're just going to use 1 route, which is going to serve us the office lines. Then the second one is our Keycloak server, which is going to store information about our users and what privileges they have, if they have the right to use our service or not. And we're also going to have a GUI, which you saw on the web page. Now how it's going to work is that the user is going to press the login button on our GUI and it's going to get redirected to our Keycloak server. And after successful login, they're going to get redirected back to our GUI with an authorization code attached. Now there's going to be a code exchanged to a authorization token, and we're going to have a role check to see if the correct role is attached. And in this case, it's going to be the paid role. So if the user is paid or not to use our service. If they have, then we're going to send a request to our API, and we're going to get back an office line that we will display on the screen. And if they have not, we're going to display an unauthorized message. This one. You must have a paid subscription to access this feature. Now the first tool we're going to use is Keycloak, which is an open source identity and access manager. And we will use it to add the authentication flow to our system. So it's going to have information about our users stored and what privileges they have and if they have the right or not to use our service. We're also going to use Docker, which is an open platform that allows developers to package applications and their dependencies into containers. And this will enable consistent execution across environments. And we once again will have 2 containers, one for our API and one for our Keycloak server. We're also going to use Postman, which is a comprehensive API development and testing tool. And this will really simplify the way that we are going to send requests and get the responses back in a nice UI. So we're going to use it to test our API route. We're also going to use React for our frontend, and this is a JavaScript library for building interactive user interfaces using reusable components. So we're going to build these components and that is going to be put together into our UI. We're also going to use White, which is a modern front-end build tool. And this will really optimize the way that we deploy our front-end. We're also going to use npm, which is a node package manager for JavaScript. And we will use it to install and manage the dependencies that we're going to use in this project. And we're also going to use Node, which is a JavaScript runtime environment that allows JavaScript to run on the server side. And this is for our backend microservice server that is going to serve us our API route. So this project is going to be in a couple of different episodes, with the first one you're watching right now. And this is going to contain the project structure and setup with all the dependencies and everything, so that we in the next episode can just continue with coding. And in that next episode, we're going to build our microservice and our small API route. And we're also going to test that route in Postman to see that it works fine and that we can continue on with the GUI build. In episode 3, I'm going to do 2 parts because it otherwise will be very long. We're going to build the GUI and the background and everything and set everything up so that we then in episode 4 can add the authentication mode with the login to Keycloak and checking the role for if the user has permission or not to use our service. So now with this done, we can continue on with the actual project setup. So the first thing you're gonna do is clone down the GitHub repo. It's gonna be in the video description, or you can just create your own if you want to. And then you're gonna open it in your favorite code editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code. The first thing we're gonna do is to create the microservice folder. And inside here, we're going to create a Docker file like this. I'm just going to paste the contents in here like this. And what this is going to do is that the Docker file is basically a template to how Docker is going to build this container. So we're going to use a node image. We're going to set the working directory inside our container to be /app. And this is where Docker is going to store all the files inside the container. Then we're going to copy over package.json, which is going to list our dependencies. And then we're going to install them. Then we're going to copy over the rest of the source files. And we're going to start our entry point here, app.js, which we're going to create here in a second. And the next thing that we need is outside microservice in the root. We're going to, like this, we're going to create a env file. And now this is just going to store some information about our Keycloak server, the credentials for the admin console. So we're just going to set our admin username and admin password to be admin, and this is going to allow us to log into our Keycloak admin console. So yeah, and now with this done, we can get into the terminal, and we're going to move inside the microservice folder. And here we're going to run npm init, and this will create a npm project. Now for package name, you can just keep it. Version description is fine. Now for entry point, you're going to change it to app.js. And then the rest you can customize if you want to, or just click through. So now we have a project inside the microservice folder with a package.json. And this is going to list our dependencies that we're now going to install. So in the terminal, you're going to type npm install express, course, and CSV parser. Like this, and it's going to install them and list them here. So Express is a fast and minimal web framework for Node.js to create APIs and web servers. And we will use it because it will serve as the backbone of the microservice. It will handle the route and requests and send out the responses. So it's going to be the service for this very small API. And then the CSV parser is a Node.js library for reading and processing CSV files. And we will use it because the office lines is actually in a CSV file, which we're going to add in a second here. So that's why we need that. And then Course is a middleware that enables cross-origin resource sharing. And we will need it because it will handle the browser restrictions between the GUI and the API. So it will simplify the process of them talking to each other. Yeah, so that's the dependencies that we need for the microservice. Now inside here, we're going to create a data folder, and we're going to copy over the office lines CSV file, and you can find it in the source code in the GitHub repo. So I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it. And here we have all the office lines, a very large file in the format character, line, season, and episode number. So great. With that done, now we can just create our entry point for the microservice, or app.js. And this is going to be a really small file in the beginning. The only thing we're going to have is we're going to import Express, and we're going to initialize it, and then we're going to start a server on port 4000. So nothing fancy, just to get started here. Now the next thing that we need to do is to set up our Keycloak configuration. And in the root, we're going to create a docker-compose.yaml file. And this file is very tab sensitive, so I would recommend you just copying it over from the source file, but you can write it and customize it if you want to. Now on the services, the different containers that we're going to use is listed. The first one being our Keycloak container, and it's going to use this image, which you can find on Docker, or just copy it in if you want to. For environment variables, we're going to use the admin username and password that we set up in the .env file. And then we're going to run some commands to start the Keycloak server and import our realm, which we're going to create in a second here. It's going to run on port 8080, use the .env file. And here for volumes, it will make it persistent through restart. So if we remove the container and re-add it, and or stop and restart, our Keycloak configuration is going to stay intact. And then network, and we're just going to specify network so that the containers can talk to each other. Now they're not going to do that in this project, but it's good practice to have a network. Then the next container is going to be our microservice container, it's going to build the microservice folder on port 4000, which we specified earlier, and use the same networks. And this is just to specify that this is the volume and network. Now our Keycloak configuration is done. Sorry, our Docker configuration is done, and now we just need to set up our Keycloak realm. So we're going to create a new folder called Keycloak. Inside it, we're going to create another folder called Keycloak_init. And inside that, we're going to create a file called realm-export.json. And I'm just going to copy this in as well, like this. And here are our realm name, demo realm. We're going to have some users, the first one being the free user, and just some information, and then the password free. And we're going to have no realm roles attached to this user. So this user has not paid for the subscription and are not going to be able to use our service. We're also going to have a paid user, password paid, and realm roles paid. So this user will have access to the features. Then here we specify that there in fact is a realm role called paid. And here we have a client, and it's going to be the gateway client. And for redirect URIs, this is very important. And we're going to have it point to our front end so that we can get redirected to it after we have logged in. And it's going to be localhost 5173. And for web origins, you can just have it as a wildcard, but it's important to have. So yeah, that's our Keycloak realm done. And now with this done, we can just continue on with creating our Docker containers. So inside the terminal, you're going to move back into the root folder. And here you're going to type docker-compose up, and you can do --build. And this is going to take a little while, but it's going to build both our containers. First the microservice container and then the Keycloak. So I'm just going to wait for them to finish. Okay, so now the containers are up and running, and you can navigate to the Keycloak admin console URL, which I'm going to leave in the video description. And you can just log in with our admin. Now, then you can check that you have this demo realm. For clients, you should have a gateway client. For users, you should have 2 users. The free one should not have any roles. And the paid one should have the role paid. So if this is correctly set up, then you are done, and we can just continue on with setting up the front end. Okay, so now we can continue on with creating our front end. So inside the terminal in the root directory, you can type npm create white at latest, and then you're going to call the front end project something. I'm going to call it the office front end, like this. And then for framework, you will choose React, and for variant, choose JavaScript. And now we got this white build here with a lot of stuff. And now the first thing we're going to do is to install the dependencies. And as you can see, there already are React and React DOM. So you're going to move inside the frontend folder. And first of all, you can just run npm install to install these two already listed. And React is a JavaScript library for building component-based user interfaces. And we will use it to develop these containers and put them together into our UI. Now React-DOM handles rendering React components into the DOM. And we will use it because it is required to connect the React application with the browser's HTML structure. Do npm install tailwind CSS at tailwind CSS /white at white.js/plugin-react and framer-motion. Now, Tailwind CSS is a utility-first CSS framework for rapidly building modern responsive designs. And we will use it because then we can just use these utility classes and not have to build our CSS classes ourselves. We can just use the predefined ones. At Tailwind CSS/white is a CSS plugin for white, and it will integrate Tailwind into our white build. The same thing for at white.js/plugin-react. It's just a React plugin for white, so we can integrate React into our white build. And then framer-motion is an animation library for React. We will use it to add animations for our button and our background and such. So yeah, that's the dependencies that we're gonna need. And the next thing we're gonna do is to change some config files. first of all, the white config file. And now the only thing that we really need to do here is we need to import Tailwind like this. And we also need to add Tailwind to our plugins here. So we have already React, but we're gonna add Tailwind CSS like this, and that's done. Now after that, we can set up some CSS files here. First of all, index.css, and here are some default styling, which we're not gonna use, so we can just remove all of it. And instead, we're just going to simply import Tailwind. Now we're gonna do exactly the same thing for app.css, remove it and import Tailwind. Now we also need to update the app.jsx, and here we are just going to have a very simple component here. We're gonna import index.css, we're gonna create our app component, and the only thing it's gonna do is to return a div. Now to check that our Tailwind is working, we also is going to add a Tailwind class to this. So the one I'm gonna use is bg orange 500, and this will give it a orange background, and then you can add a text in here. I'm just gonna add hello. So when we later check if we have an hello text with an orange background, then Tailwind is working correctly. Now we also need to change some things inside the index.html. For our title text, I'm going to have line generator instead. And for this SVG, I'm going to update it with a custom one. It's going to be the authz.svg. And I'm also going to copy that over now, which you can find in the GitHub repo. And we're going to paste it inside the public folder like this. So with that done, I think we are ready to test it. So to do that, we're going to stay in the frontend folder, and you're going to run npm run build first to build this and see if we have any errors. That went fine. Then you can do npm run dev to start the frontend server, and then you can just navigate to localhost 5173. Gonna drag it in here, and it seems like maybe I didn't save the index, so I'm gonna do that. Then we can go back, and as you can see, we have our custom favicon and our title, and we have an orange background for our hello text. So now our frontend is set up correctly, and we are all done. So now we can just continue on in episode 2. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Office Line Generator project. In today's episode, we're gonna expand on a microservice and add the route to get a random office line. And we're also gonna test this route in Postman. So it's gonna be a pretty short episode, and we're gonna move through it pretty quickly. So first of all, inside our microservice, we're gonna create a utils folder. And inside that, we're gonna create our file, which is gonna be csv util.js. We're going to require some things. So the first thing we're going to require is fs, and this is a Node's built-in file system module, and we're going to use it to be able to read our file and store its contents. And we're also going to need to require a path, which is also a built-in module, which is used for really simplifying the process of specifying where our file is in the file directory. And then we're also going to require CSV parser, which I mentioned in the setup video, but it will basically make it able so that the lines inside the CSV file can be processed as JavaScript objects. So that's going to simplify the process a bunch. Then we're going to create a function here, get CSV data, and we're going to create a results array, which is going to be empty at the start. And then we're going to use a promise. And this is because when you read a file, it can sometimes take some time, depending on how large the file is, some milliseconds or even some seconds in some cases. And we don't want our program to stop and wait for the reading to be done. We want it to continue with other tasks. So that's why we use a promise here. And we're going to do a fs create read stream. And this is basically because we don't want to read our whole file at once and have it in the memory, because it's unnecessary and can jog up your memory. So we're going to read it in a steady stream of a little data at a time. So think of it as a data stream. Now we're going to specify our path to the office lines CSV file, and __dir name is so that we can begin moving from this file's location. And then we move up one folder into the microservice folder, and then inside the data folder, and we specify the officelines.csv file. like this. And then we're going to pipe our data stream into the CSV parser module so that it will turn them into JavaScript objects. And then we're going to, for every row, a data row, we are going to do some stuff here. Sorry, like this. And we're going to push into our results array. And what we're going to push in is the different columns that we mentioned that is in the CSV file. So first we have character, and here we're going to get it from the data object like this. But if there is none, then we're just going to return an empty string like this. Yes, and then we're going to trim it in case there's any white spaces. We're going to do the exact same here for the line portion, or an empty string like this, and then we're going to trim it like this. And then we have some ints here. We're going to parse them as an int in case they are in the string format, and we're going to do it in the base 10. And we have episode data.episode underscore number base 10 like this. I'm just going to check that I have capitalization on, and it seems to be working fine. Good. Now after this, we're going to check when there is no more data, when it's at the end portion. Then we're going to check if we actually have some data or not. So we're going to check if there is no data objects in the results array. Then we're just going to raise a reject here with a new error of that the CS file is empty, like this. Otherwise, we're going to resolve with the results like this. And then we're going to check if we got some error while reading some of the lines. Then we're going to reject those errors so that we can see that. Like this, it seems like I have some format issue here. I'm going to quickly check over. Yeah, okay, so I forgot to do this. And this should be outside, not inside. And here we have it. This is our getCSV data function. It's going to take the whole file, CSV file, and it's going to create a read stream, and we're going to process it, and we're going to get out an array of the office lines as JavaScript objects. Now this is good, but we also want to be able to get a random entry from it. So for that, we're going to create another function, getRandomEntry, we're going to call it. This is going to be an async function because we need to await the promise, and we're going to await get CSV data like this, and we're going to get a random index from the math module, math.random times data.length. And this is going to get a random index from 0 to the amount of rows in the data minus 1 because it starts at 0. So this will get a random entry from the dataset, and we are just going to return that line. Now this is done. Now we can just export these functions, get randoms entry and get CSV data like this. And this is the whole util file. I hope it makes sense. So now we have a way to read our file and get a random entry from it. Now, the only thing we need to do now is to actually create our route to get this random entry. But first, we need to import the get random entry from our util file. Okay, so now we have imported that, and we also need to set up some middleware. So we're going to use express.json. This will let us handle JSON objects. And we are going to use the course module that we installed in the last episode, and this will handle browser restrictions between our GUI and our API. We're going to use it as a middleware, and then we're going to define our only route of this very small API. It's going to be a get route. It's going to be at /random. It's going to be an async because again we will need to await 2 parameters, request and response. Inside here, we're going to have a try catch, random data like this. And we're going to await get random entry. And the only thing it's going to do is it's going to respond with the random data, like the random entry. If something goes wrong, we're going to catch it, and we're going to have just an all-encompassing response here. Typically, you would have several, like there is a bunch of stuff that can go wrong, but we are just going to have a 500 status code like this, and we are going to say failed to read CSV. Yeah, and that is it. So now we have everything we need to test it. So a very small and minimal API. Okay, but to be able to test it, we need to restart our Docker containers. So inside the root folder here, you can do docker compose down. And then when that's done, you're gonna type docker compose up -- build. I've already done this, so we can just move on to Postman. Now inside Postman here, we are going to create a new request. I've already done this, but you just press the plus button, then you choose get, and then you enter your URL. And this is the URL, localhost 4000/random. So if this works correctly, we're gonna get a random entry and an office line. We got a 200 OK status, and we got a random office line here from the character Michael. Season 2, episode 9. We can do another one. It's also from Michael, another one from Phyllis, and so on. So now our API is working, and we can move on in the next episode with our GUI. Hello, and welcome to the third episode of this, the Office build. In today's episode, we're gonna build a GUI, and I'm gonna do it in a couple of steps. With the first one being just getting a quote up on the screen, and that we can call from the API, and that we can see that that works. And then we can worry about animations and the background and stuff. So the first thing we're gonna do is inside the Office Frontend project and inside source, we're gonna create a components folder. And inside that, we're gonna create our first React component, and I'm gonna call it line generator.jsx. Now this is going to be the base component, which we're going to call other components from and build our UI from. So this is going to be like the base component for us. So the first thing I want to do here is to import a couple of things, and I'm just going to copy them in here. Now the first thing we import is the useState from React, and this will allow us to create state variables, which I'm going to explain a little bit about when we define them. Then we import motion and animate presence from FrameMotion, and this is for animating. And then we have two other components which we're going to build after this. So these two you can just import. It's actually not going to be, it's not going to be the one like this. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is that I want to define our API URL, and this we're going to have in a environment environment variable file. And to get it inside the GUI, we need to import it. And it's going to be called white_API_URL. Now we can actually create this directly so we don't forget. So outside source, inside the Office frontend, you can create a file called .env.local. This is going to be the environment file for the GUI, like this. And the only thing we're going to have right now is the API URL. And you need to name it in this convention with white first, because inside the white build, this is what it will look for in the environment variable. So you need to specify white here. And this just points to localhost 4000. Good. Now that we have done that, we can continue on with actually creating the component like this. And now we can define our state variables. So the first one that I want to have is a quote one. And this is a variable that's going to hold the active quote or the office line. So this is going to hold the text of the quote, of the office quote. Then we're going to have another state variable for holding the error text that we will display if something goes wrong or if the user doesn't have permission later on. And the last one we're going to need right now is a loading variable. And this is going to be a Boolean, either set to true or false, depending on if the office line is loading from the API. If we have, if you remember from the last episode, we await the response from the CSV file because it can take a little bit of time to read it. And right now we're going to await the API response. So while we're waiting for that, it will later we will set the text to loading and so forth. So that's what we need there. Now I'm gonna do another function here, which is going to be called fetch random line. It's going to be an async function like this. And the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to set our error variable to null. We're going to reset it, because if we have set the error to some error text, if there was a problem and then we generate again, we don't want the error text to still be there. We want it to reset. For loading, we're gonna set it to true, because in the beginning, when we're generating a new quote, it should be loading. Then we're gonna have a try catch. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna await a response from our API, like this API URL, which we defined earlier, and we're gonna do /random. So we got localhost 4000 and then /random. Yes, and this is not gonna do anything other than just call the API. Yes, and then we're gonna check if the response is okay, and if it's not, if it doesn't get an okay message, then we're gonna throw an error. Network response was not okay. And if that doesn't happen, like if the response is okay, then we're gonna declare a variable called data here, and we're gonna await the response in JSON format. So here we're gonna get the actual office line, it's gonna be in the data variable. And then we're gonna set our quote, our state variable, to be data. So the quote is now gonna be the JSON object. And we're gonna do a catch, and we can set error to could not fetch a quote. Please try again. Then we're gonna set the quote to null, because when there is an error, we don't want the previous quote to still be on the page. We want it to reset. And then we're also gonna have a finally, and this will always trigger, and this will trigger when it's done. And then we will set loading to false. So here we basically say that we call the API, and if we get an error or we get a response, when that is finished, when we know what we have gotten and it has shown up on the screen, then we set loading to false. Yes, and then we need one more function, and that is gonna be for when we press the generate quote button, and I'm gonna call it handle click. It's gonna be an async function, and the only thing it's gonna do is fetch the random line. So when we press the button, fetch random line is gonna trigger. So that is all the thing we need to set up, and now we can actually just return our component. So we're gonna return, and the first thing we want is a main element with some tailwind clauses. Now, the first one, relative. Then we're gonna have the full height of the viewport. We're gonna do a flexbox centering, both vertically and horizontally. Then we're gonna set the background to be a light gray, and we're gonna have some padding, and we're gonna have some more padding on smaller screens. So on small screens, we're gonna have padding 6, on bigger screens, padding 4. And we're also gonna have overflow hidden, and this is mostly for the background, which we're gonna have later, because when the content is moving outside the viewport, we don't want the screen to jump around. We want it to be set. So here we have our main function, element. Now the next thing we need is a header. It's just gonna be a regular header, and inside it we're gonna do a motion.h1. And you may not be familiar with the motion elements, but it's basically just the same element, but you're able to animate it using frame in motion. So it's nothing fancy. It's just a way to tell frame in motion that it's an element that it should animate. And now for these durations is in auth. This is basically just a very basic animation for easing in and out when the layout changes. So it's just gonna look nice on the page. And then we're also gonna have some tailwind clauses. We're gonna have some different text sizes depending on the size of the screen. And this H1 is gonna hold our title text. So we're gonna have some bold text, and the text color to be a dark gray. And we're also gonna have some margin on the bottom. So that's that. And inside here, we're gonna have some title text, the office line generator. After this, the header is finished. And now we're gonna add a error element if we have set error to be something, if it's not null. So if error is something, then we're gonna create this P element, paragraph element, with some red text and some margin on the bottom. And we're going to set a role for this, and this is more for accessibility, so that screen readers can also see that it's an important thing that happened. And inside here, we're going to have just the error text, like this. And that is basically it. So if the error is something, then we're going to have this error text here in red. Now we also need another div with, again, some clauses. Margin bottom, and the minimum height of it will be 6 rem. so it can't get too small on small screens. And then we're also gonna have some flex centering and justify center. Yeah, so it's gonna center it. Now inside here, we're gonna have the animate presence with the mode wait and initial set to false. I'm going to explain this in just a moment. But inside here, we're going to check if the loading boolean is true or not. And if it is true, then we're going to pass in our loading spinner here, which we haven't created yet, but we will do in just a second. So if the loading is set to true, then we're going to have the loading spinner. And if it's set to false, then we're going to have our quote display. So we're going to display our quote or spinning loading thing. Yeah, like this. Sorry, wrong way. Like this, yes, and then animate present motion div. Now, the animate present, it basically handles exit and enter animations when loading switches between a spinner and the quote. So it's going to wait for it to switch. Initially, it's not going to be an animation, but when it switches from the loading to the quote, then it's going to animate it. The next part that we need is a button, which is going to be the generate quote button. And we're going to set on click here for it to do the handle click function that we defined earlier. And we're going to set it to disabled when the loading state variable is true. So when we are loading, we don't want to be able to press the button. So therefore we set it to disabled. And once again, we're going to have some tailwind classes here. The full viewport of the width on smaller screens, we're going to have the width set to auto. We're going to have some padding left and right, 1 rem, and also some padding top and bottom of 0.5 rem. Now we also need a background, and we're going to put it to blue, and the text of the bottom should be white, some nice rounded corners, and we're going to have a shadow, a drop shadow, just a subtle one, and on hover, when the user is hovering it, we're going to set the background color to be a little bit darker blue so that you can see some difference when you hover it. And we're going to set that when it is disabled, then the opacity is going to be just 50%. So it's going to fade out a bit when it's disabled and when it is loading, basically. So that is basically it. Now inside this button, we are also going to check if the loading is set to true or false. If it's true, then the text is going to be loading so that the user can see that it's loading and it can't press the button. And when it's false, it will be generate quote. Yeah, so that is basically our whole line generator component for right now. We're going to add a bunch of stuff to it later. Let's see. So we will close it down here, and then we are also going to export it. Okay, so now that we're done with our line generator, we can move on to creating the other components that we need. So we can start by creating the quote display. So inside components, we're going to create a new folder, new file called quote display.jsx. And inside here, we're going to import two things. We're going to import use ref and use effect from the React library. And I'm going to explain them in just a second. And then we're going to export our component, quote display. And it's going to take one parameter, which is going to be our quote. So it takes the quote state variable as a parameter that we had in the line component, line generator component. And then we're going to do a quote ref here, which is going to be a use ref with value of null. And this is going to be a reference that will be attached to the block quote element that we're later going to create here. And when we later call quote ref.current.focus, we will programmatically move focus to that element. And this is important for accessibility because screen readers, users will then know that a new quote has appeared because focus will shift to it. Now the next thing we're going to create is a use effect here, and it looks like this. And here we're going to check if the quote is something, if we have set it to something, and our quote ref is active. Then we're going to set the thing I just said, the focus, to the block quote element that we're going to create in a second here, like this, and that is done. Now we're going to also check if there is no quote, if we didn't pass anything to this. We're just going to return null because we don't want to render a component if we don't need to. But if there is a quote, then we're going to return some elements. So the first element we're going to return is this block quote. Now, what a block quote is, it is a semantic HTML element for displaying a quotation. And it tells browsers and screen readers and search engines that the content inside is a quoted piece of text. So now we're going to attach our reference, which is called our quote ref, to this element, class name. And we're going to have some class names here to center the text and remove the default outline like this. And then we're going to have some accessibility attributes. One is area live, which we're going to set to the value of polite. And this will tell screen readers that announce the changes here, but do it politely. So like wait until the user has finished reading the current content, then announce it. Don't just interrupt it and announce it right away. And we're also going to have an aria atomic attribute. This is going to be set to true. And this ensures that the entire block quote is read as one unit and not in pieces. So it will be together. And then we're going to have a tab index of -1. And this makes the element focusable, but not part of the normal tab order. So we can focus on it using the quoteref.current.focus, but users don't accidentally tab into it. Now our block quote element is done here. And inside it, we're going to have a different of other elements. So we're going to have a paragraph element with some classes. So we're going to have some responsive text sizes depending on the size of the screen. So I'm just going to add these real quick. And the font is going to be italic, and the text color is going to be a dark gray. And we will have some margin on the bottom. And inside this paragraph element, we're going to have the quote.line. So the line is going to be inside here. Now we need the other information as well. Now we're gonna create a footer. A footer inside a block quote is semantic HTML for who said the quote. So this is where the author of the quote will be. We're gonna have some semi-bold text, and the text is gonna be a dark gray and some margin on the bottom. So now that's finished, and inside here we're gonna have a site element, like this, and this is gonna be the author, so the quote.character is gonna be here. The site element is specifically for the source of a quote or citation. So it will here wrap the character's name. Now outside the footer, we're going to have another P element, paragraph element, with some classes like this. Now here we're going to have some small text, and the text is going to be a dark gray once again. And inside here, we will display the season and the episode number that we get from the quotes, like this and this. And now it's actually done. Okay, so now that we finished with the quote display component, we can move on to the second component that we're going to create now, which is a loading spinner.jsx. Now inside here, we're not going to import anything. We're just going to export the component loading spinner like this. And inside here, we're just going to return firstly a div with the role of status. So this will tell screen readers that it is a status message. We're going to have area live attribute of polite, which I explained in the last component. And we will have some classes to make it a flexbox and justify its content horizontally and add margin on top and the bottom. And we're also going to have an area label attribute of loading new quote. And this will be read out to screen readers. So even if they can't see the spinner visually, they will hear the text and they will hopefully know what it is. Inside here, we're going to have an SVG element, and this is actually going to be the spinner graphic, and we're going to define it with the SVG format. So we're going to have an SVG, and we're going to have some classes to it, and animate spin, which is going to continuously spin it or rotate it infinitely. As long as it's on the page, it's going to spin. Then we're gonna set it to a fixed height and width of 1.5 rem, which is 24 pixels. And we're gonna set its fill color to be blue. Now we're also gonna do an XML and S attribute. And this is basically that we declare its namespace, so that browsers know that this is markup is SVG and not HTML. So we're just gonna set it to HTTP and www.v3.org/2000/svg, and we're gonna fill value of none, and this will make it so that spaces is not filled unless we specify it. And then we will have a view box of 0, 0, 24, 24. And this will define the coordinates of our SVG. So it will start at the top left, and it will be 24 units wide and 24 units tall. Like this, and then we're gonna have an area hidden, set to true. And this will hide it from screen readers, since the div already has an area label. We don't need to show this to screen readers. Now inside our SVG, we also need some shapes. So we're gonna have a circle element for the background, and this is gonna have a simple class of just opacity 25, so 25% opacity, so it's gonna be a little bit faded out. Then we're gonna have some CX value of 12 and CY value of also 12. And this will create a center point at 12, 12, which will be in the middle of the 24 by 24 view box. And we're also gonna have a radius of 10 units, so like this. We're gonna have a stroke variable to be the current color. And this is gonna just use the color that we set earlier, the blue. And then we're gonna have a stroke width of 4 units. And this will create a border thickness of 4 units. Now we're gonna close it up. Now with the circle done, we also need a path element, and this will be the spinning arc. Now for this, we need also a class, and we're gonna set this opacity to be 75%, so it's gonna be more visible than the circle. We will fill it with the current color, so like the blue one that we set earlier, and we will have a D value, and I'm just gonna copy this in because I don't want to type it. And this will basically be the SVG's path definition, a series of commands telling the SVG how to draw the shape. So you can just copy this in, and we just have to close this element, and then this is done. So here we have our loading spinner ready. So when this is done, everything is ready for us to test it, except actually I was almost about to forget, inside our app.jsx. I've already done this, but you will have to import line generator component and add it inside the app here, so that it will actually be displayed on the page.
Okay, so I actually found an error that we need to fix before we can test it. Inside the loading spinner component, I accidentally had these curly brackets when it should just be parentheses. So I'm just going to change that, and now it should be ready. So I want you to navigate to the Frontend folder, and then from there you can run npm run build to build the white project. It's going to take just a moment. And then you can do npm run dev to start the frontend server. Like this, and then you can just navigate to the localhost. And I'm already here. Let's see, and here you can see we just have some simple GUI with just the title text and the button. And when we press it, we get our loading spinner, and then we get a quote. So yeah.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of episode 3, where we build the GUI for the Office line generator. Now one thing that I saw in the last part that I accidentally did wrong is inside our quote display here, I accidentally did quote.season twice, so it should actually be quote.episode here for the episode number. So just change that, and then we're ready to move on. Now in today's episode I want to focus on the color schemes for the background and making the background and animations for it so that the page will look good, and we are ready then to move on in episode 4 with doing the authentication of the system. So the first thing I want to create is a helper function and a util file for, let's see, in source here, for getting our color schemes. So you're going to create a utils folder, and inside it you're going to create a file called colorpalettes.js. Now I'm just going to copy in this code because it's a lot to write on your own, and I'm going to try to explain it because it's a lot of math and I'm not 100% sure how to explain it, but I'm going to try my best. So the first thing I want to create is some base colors for the main characters, and I have done this by creating an object here. So for example, Michael and Pam and all of the main characters is going to have a color that the gradient is going to be based on. And this was just because if we have it completely random, then it might not really fit the main characters, and these show up the most, so I thought it would be nice. So you can pick your own colors, or you can just copy it in. Now for the rest of the characters that's not one of these, it's going to be just a random color scheme based on their string value. So the first function that we're going to create is a helper function, because we need to turn our hex values, these color values, into HSL. And HSL stands for hue, saturation, and light. So we need to format them into HSL instead, because then it will be much easier to create color palettes that we can make good gradients from it. Yeah, so the first is a helper function here, which will turn our hex values into HSL format. So we're going to pass in our hex value, and then we're going to remove the hashtag from it. So this is just a regex to remove the hashtag. And then we're going to calculate how much red, green, and blue are in these hex values. So it's going to take each part of the value, and it's going to calculate it on a scale of 0 to 1, how much red, how much green, how much blue it is. Okay? And then we're going to calculate the max and the min values of these. So we're going to get if it's the most red, if red is the dominant color, or if it's green or blue, and what is the least. And then we're just going to set our hue, saturation, and lightness to the middle of max plus min. And then we're going to check if max in fact is the same as min, then all the colors will be the same. Then it's just going to be a gray color, and we can set hue and saturation to 0. If it's not, if there are in fact some dominant color, then we're going to calculate the difference between max and min. And then we're going to do this formula for calculation the saturation. And this is just going to check if the lightness is bigger or smaller than 0.5. And if it's bigger, then we're going to do this calculation. And if it's smaller, then we're going to do this calculation. So now we have our saturation, and now we're going to calculate our hue. And we're going to put in the max value, the dominant color, and then we're going to check if it was red, green, and blue. And then we make these calculations depending on which it was. And now this is going to turn out for red to either be -4 or 0. And then we're either going to add 6 or 0. So we're going to get the value of 0 to 2 here. For green, we're going to get the value of 2 to 4. And for blue, we're going to get the value between 4 and 6. But now we want it on the color wheel. And the wheel is 360 degrees. So we need to multiply it by 60. So the minimum value we're going to get is 0 times 60, which is just going to be 0. Or the maximum is 6 times 60, which is 360. So we're going to get somewhere on the scale. And then we're just going to return, rounded up our hue, our saturation in percentage, and our lightness in percentage. So yeah, that is the whole helper function here. Now we have another function, and this is to calculate and get our color palette for our gradient. So we're going to take in 3 parameters here, a string. And this is for the non-main characters. So like if you have Susan, for example, which is not in my color palette, then it's just going to be the string Susan that gets passed in here. Then we have a count, and this is set to how many colors we want, and the default is 5. And we're going to use 5 in this system, but you can set it to whatever you want. And then we're going to pass in a base hue if we have one, and this is for our main characters, the thing that we calculated from our helper function. Yeah. So first we're going to check if our base hue is a hex, if we have passed in a main character from it. So then we're going to get our HSL format from our helper function. And then we're going to create a empty array to store our colors. And then we're going to loop through each count. So like in the default case 5 times. And then we're going to push into our color array in the HSL format. And we're going to shift by every count 12 degrees. So we get some difference in the colors. And it's going to be between 0 and 359. because it's on the colors wheel scheme that I said before, and we're just gonna have the saturation and lightness, it's gonna be the same. And then we're just gonna return our color array. So we're gonna get a color array of 5 HSL colors. Now let's say we haven't passed in a main character, it's some other character like Susan for example, then we will not have a base hue in a hex format, we're just gonna have a string instead. So now we need another calculation here. So we first initialize hash and set it to 0 just to start off, and then we loop through each character of the string. So like for Susan it's going to be 5 characters, and then we do a calculation here based on the Unicode that is going to turn our text into a reproducible number. So Susan and let's say Kevin, now Kevin is a main character but it's another name, is going to get a different number here. I hope that makes sense. So for each non-main character, we're going to get a random number here, but it's always going to be the same for that string. So Susan will always have the same number here. Yeah. And then we check if we didn't have any base hue, and then we're going to calculate it based on our hash, based on this number. And it's going to be between 0 and 359, so it stays on the color wheel. And then we're going to do the same here by creating a colors array, and we're going to loop through each count to see how many colors we want, and we're going to calculate the hue, and we're going to start at what it is, and then we're going to add 12 degrees for every count, just like we did before, and it's going to stay on the color wheel here. And then we have saturation, which we're going to have a base value of 30, and then we're going to add a number between 0 and 24. And this is going to give a final value of between 30 and 54, and this will ensure that we don't get too extreme saturation, so it's not going to be too gray or not too vivid. So it's going to be a good mix here. And then we have lightness, and we're going to do the same, but we're going to have a base value of 40, and we're going to add a value between 0 and 29 based on the hash. And this will make sure that it's not too dark and not too bright. And then we're going to push them into the array in the same format with the hue, saturation, and lightness, and then we're just going to return them. So yeah, this is the color palettes file. Okay, so now that we're done with our color palettes, we can create a component that we're going to need, and this is going to be for our background. So we're going to create a new component, call it gradient border.jsx. Inside here, we're going to have to import motion from frame emotion to be able to create our animations that we want for our background. So we are going to define our component here, gradient border, and we're going to pass into it 2 parameters. One is gradient, and this we will get from our color palettes file. Another is children, and this is going to be the content that we want to appear inside our box. Like this. The first thing we're going to create is a div with some classes. We're going to have relative. Then we're going to have p1, which is some small padding. We're going to have rounded to XL. And this is just going to give us some round corners on it. And we're going to set overflow to visible. And this will make sure that it isn't clipped when it moves outside the viewport. Yeah, so that is that div. Inside here, we're going to have a motion div, which we're going to animate. So we're going to put an animate attribute, and we're going to set it to rotate 360. And this is going to rotate it 360 degrees. Now for transition, we're going to set it to, repeat infinity. And this is going to infinitely repeat our animation. We're going to have a duration of 20. So it's going to do one full rotation every 20 seconds. And then we're going to have ease set to linear. And this will spin smoothly. Then we're going to have some classes to it. And we're going to have absolute. And we're going to have inset of 0. And this is just going to fill our parent box here. Then we're going to have some rounded 2XL corners again. Let's see, we're going to have also the pointer events of none. And this is going to make sure the border doesn't block clicks, so like we doesn't hit this accidentally. Then we're going to have some styling. I'm going to set the background to be our gradient that we got from the color palettes. And we're going to set the Z index to 1. And this will ensure that it sits behind the content, but above the background. So it's going to be positioned nicely between there. And we're going to set area hidden to true. Sorry, like this. And this will hide it from screen readers because it's only visual. It doesn't really matter in the usage of the system. Now we're going to create a smaller box inside of here. So we're going to need another div with some class names. Absolute. We're going to have an inset of 1 to fill it up again. We're going to have some rounded corners. We're going to have a white background. And we're going to have a Z index of 10. And it's going to sit above the gradient layer but below the content. We also need an area hidden of true once again because it's only visual, like this. And then we're going to need another div for our content. This is going to be position relative, have some rounded corners again, white background, and a Z index of 20. And this will ensure that the content sits on top of everything else. Now inside of this div, we're going to pass in the children parameter. So this is going to be the content that we want to be displayed. So, and now it's done. So this is our whole component here. Okay, so now that we're done with the gradient border, we can move on to update our line generator component. Now, the first thing that we need to update is we need another thing from Frame Emotion, and that is use animation. And this will give us some more control over our animations. Now we're also going to need to import I'm just going to copy this in actually. We also need to import the new components and the functions from our color palettes here. So we're going to import gradient border and color palettes and string to colors from our util file. And the next thing that we're going to want to do is that I want some more control over the button. And to get that, we're going to have some button controls. Button controls, which is going to be use animation. And I also want to specify an audio path. And this is because when you press the button, I would like a sound to play. So I know the path, but we're going to copy it in here shortly, but it's going to be drop _003.ogg. So now we need to copy this over, and I'm going to do that really quickly here. And you can find it on the GitHub repo. And inside public, we're going to just paste it. And here we have our sound, and this is what it sounds like. Yeah. Okay. So now that we're done with that, we can move on. And now we need to update our, let's see where that is here, handle click function. Because right now it only fetches the random line, but I would like it to play play the sound first of all. So we're gonna await new audio, and we're gonna play our audio path. So when you press the button, the audio is gonna play. Then we're gonna fetch the random line, and now we also want some animations. So we're gonna use the use animations here from our buttons control, and we're gonna set some animations here. Let's see, like this. And we're gonna make it smaller first with a transition, let's see, like this, of a duration of 0.2 seconds. Yeah, and then we want another one Sorry. And this is going to be to make it big again. Of also the same duration here, 0.2. Yeah. So first it's going to shrink to a scale of 0.8, and this will give like a press effect, and then it's going to go back to normal with a scale of 1. I have something wrong here. Let's see. Yeah, I forgot this. Yeah. Okay, so now our handle click is done. Now we actually want to get the colors for our gradient. So the first thing we need is our base hue. We're going to check if quote is set to something. And if it is, then we're going to call our color palettes function. No, sorry, we're going to get the color palettes object. It's not a function. And inside here, we're going to get the quote.character. So for example, if it's Michael, then we're going to get that. And we're going to check if that exists. And if it does, then we're going to get the first color from it. There is only one, but it's good to do this. Or else we're going to get null. So let's say, for example, that our quote.character contains Michael. Michael is our main character. It's going to be in our color palettes. It's going to get its color. If it has Susan, Susan is not in our color palettes, then it's going to return null. So base hue will either be null or Michael's color right now. Yeah, the next part we want to calculate is our colors. We are once again going to check if quote exists, if it's set to something. Then we're going to call our string to colors function. We're going to pass in our character, like Michael, for example, character. We're going to pass in how many colors we want. This is default to 5, but I'm going to pass in 5 anyway. And we're going to pass in our base hue, so Michael's color, or null. So if we don't have a quote, we're not going to do anything here. So if we have Michael here for colors, for example, we're going to call a string to colors function with Michael, 5 colors, and a color. And if we have Susan, we're going to call it with Susan as the string, 5 colors, and null as base hue. So it's going to calculate it like we did in string to colors. Now we also need a gradient for this. And we're going to check if we have defined colors. And if we have, then we're going to make a gradient of it. So let's see with these, conic gradient. And we're going to use our colors here. Colors.join. So we're going to use our array of colors. And we're going to join them by a comma. Or if colors is not defined, we're going to make a, let's see, like this, a default conic gradient. Of just a black color to a slightly less black color. Now let's see like this. Yeah, so we're either going to get a gradient from our character or just a black if we don't have a character. Yeah, I hope that's pretty understandable. Now I also want our content to be able to shrink if the quote is really long. So like if you have a really long quote, I want the whole like box to shrink so that you can see it clearly and it doesn't take up the whole screen. So for that we need another function, and we're gonna create it and call it scale, get scale for quote. And we're gonna pass in our quote as a parameter like this. And first we're gonna check if, let's see if we don't have a quote, if there is no quote. If there is no quote at line, sorry. And if there isn't, we're just going to return a 1, and I will explain it in a second. So it's going to stay the same scale. So for example, if we don't have a quote, it's just going to stay the same scale. It's not going to modify it any. And then we're going to calculate the length of our q.line. Like this. And then we're going to check if the length is more than 120, so it's going to be a really long quote, then we're going to return a value of 0.85. So then the content is going to scale down to 85%. Now if it's smaller than 120, but it's still bigger than 80, then we're going to return 0.9. So it's going to scale down to 90%. And if it's smaller than 80, but it's bigger than 40, then we're going to return 0.95. And else, we're going to just return a 1. So if it's smaller than 40 words, then it's just going to stay the same scale. If it's bigger than 40, it's going to scale down depending on how big it is. Yeah, so I hope that's pretty straightforward. Then we need to actually get our scale. So we're just going to call this function with our quote. So yeah, that is that. And now we just need to update our element that we return. So we need to wrap our whole card in this animated gradient border. So under main, but above header, we're going to add our gradient border component. And we're going to set its gradient to be the gradient that we calculated earlier. Now we're also going to need a motion.section. And this is going to have some animations on it. So first we have layout, and we're going to have an initial set to opacity of 0 and a scale of 0.98. We're going to have an animation to make it opacity 1 and the scale that we set earlier. So it's going to be the scale of the scale. So we're going to start a little bit smaller, and then we're going to either shrink or grow into the scale that we set. And then we're going to have an exit animation for when the quote disappears. Opacity of 0 and a scale of 0.98. So it's going to shrink a bit and disappear. And then we're going to have a transition with a duration of 0.5 and ease of ease in out. Okay, now we also need some classes. We're going to have some different sizes depending on the screen size so that it stays responsive. Like this, and on medium screens it's going to be like this. And then we need some rounded corners. Again, we want a drop shadow, some padding, and on smaller screens we want some more padding. And we want to center the text. Then I want to set the tab index to -1. Like this. So with that done, we can move on. We can close it first of all. And these two we want to move down because these are gonna encapsulate the rest of the components. So like here, and we can format this in a second. Yeah, so that's great. Now we can continue down to our button, which we also need to update. So here we want some animations as well. For animations, we're gonna use our button controls that we defined earlier. Like this. We're gonna set some effects while we hover it. We're gonna set its scale to be a little bit bigger. So when you hover it, it's gonna get a little bit bigger. And then while you are tapping it, we're gonna set it to a little bit smaller. So while you hover it, it's going to get bigger, and then while you press it, it's going to get smaller. One click, handle click, disabled, and the class names are all fine. And that is it. Now I'm just going to format this. And we are done. Now we can test it. Okay, so I actually tested this code and it didn't work. So I've done some debugging and I found a couple of issues that we need to fix. So inside this line generator, I accidentally wrote the wrong class name here. There's going to be a colon here instead of a underscore in the motion.section. And then also in the button, it is, let's see, was it in the button? No, where was it? Here. in the motion.div here. It's items center, not item. Okay. So now line generator should be fine, but we also need to fix in gradient border because I accidentally did a brackets here when it should be a parenthesis so that we actually return something like this. So if you fix this, then you can start your front end, or you can rebuild it if you want to check for other errors by npm run build, but I'm just gonna start it with npm run dev.
And here you can see our background, which is spinning, and since we don't have a character right now, the background is just the black that we set. And then when we generate a quote, it will change to the character's color. So this is Jim's colors, and as you can see, the display scales depending on how big the quote is. And I said wrong before, it's not scaling on how many words it is, it's characters. So yeah, so now we're finished with our GUI.
Hello and welcome to the fourth and final episode of the Office line generator build. If you remember from last time, we finished with our GUI before we add the authentication, and we have our line generator ready and we can generate some quotes. And it's responsive and it works fine. Now we need to actually update our code here. But before we do that, we can Control-C to stop the server, and we can move out. Stay in the front-end folder, and we're gonna install some more dependencies. So I'm going to copy this in here, and the dependencies we're going to install is Keycloak-JS, which is a JavaScript adapter for Keycloak authentication, and it will handle login, logout, and token management directly from our front end. So that's really helpful. We're also going to install React-authz-context, which is a React context library for handling OpenID Connect authentication flows. And it will provide a structured way for us to integrate authentication into our React components. And then we also need, let's see where that went here, at react-keycloak/web. And this is a React integration library for Keycloak, and it will simplify the process of the Keycloak authentication within our React app. And it will provide with some hooks and contexts. So this is all going to make sense later, but you need to install these three dependencies and just copy this, and then you're ready to move on. Okay, so another thing I want to do before we really start here is to move out some code from our line generator, because it's going to be pretty long if we keep all of this inside. So one thing that we definitely can move out is this function getScaleForQuote. So I'm going to take this and we're going to make a util file instead. So inside our utils here, we're going to create a new file, and this is going to be called, like this. This is going to be called quote scaling.js, and you can just copy in this function. And now in line generator, we are going to keep this line. This is fine, but we're going to have to import it instead. So we're gonna import getScaleForQuote. Let's see, I can just copy it in. So that's done. Now we removed some code from here. Now the other thing I want to move out is our gradient logic, this. So we can remove this, and we can create a new util file, and this is going to be called just gradients.js. And inside this, we're going to import color palettes and string to color from our other util file, color palettes. And we're going to export a function called getGradientForQuote. And we're going to pass in a quote here. And now we're just going to check if there is a quote, if it's defined. And if it's not, then we're just going to return a conic gradient of black to slightly less black, just like we did before. So it's going to be the same logic here, and then we're going to define our base hue again. And you could probably just have copied over now that I think about it, but I'm gonna do it again anyway. And I explained this logic in the last episode, so if you feel confused, then you can just check that out. Like this, and we need our colors as well, string to colors. We're gonna pass in our character here. We're gonna pass in 5 colors and our base hue, like this, and then it's gonna return a conic gradient of our colors, like this, colors.join. I'm gonna join them by a comma, and this is done. So now we have moved out some utility clauses and we are ready to move on to create some new components. So inside our component, I want to create first of all, a login button, login_button.jsx. And this is going to be a really small component. So we're just going to export our login button. And this is going to take a parameter of our login URL. And this is where we want to redirect to when we press the login button. So the only thing it's going to do is it's going to return a button with the on click of a anonymous function, which is going to redirect the user to our login URL. And then it's going to have some styling. It's going to have some padding like this. It's going to have a blue background and some white text, and it's going to be rounded. Now we can close it up and just say login. That is the whole button. Now it's done. So that was easy. Now we can move on to a little more challenging component. And this is going to be our toggle switch, which we will use to toggle if authentication mode should be on or off. So we're going to create a new component here. Oh, sorry. Toggle switch.jsx. And now this is a little more confusing. First of all, we're going to import some stuff. Use state and use effect from React. We are going to import also motion from FrameMotion. Like this, and then we can start building our component. So we're going to export toggle which, like this. And this is going to take quite a lot of parameters. So it's going to take an onToggle parameter, which is going to be a callback for when the switch changes. We're going to have an initial value of false. And this is because the switch is going to start off being not turned on. Let's see, did I do anything wrong here? Initial false now. Okay, let's continue. Label is going to be default to enable login. Now disabled is going to be set to false, but we can change this later. And we're also going to have another parameter called force on. And this is for refreshing the page. Then if we have turned on the toggle, we still want it to be on. We don't want it to fall into the default of being off. So this is going to be our parameters for the toggle switch. Yes, and now we can continue on. And inside of here, we are going to have a state variable, which is going to be called enabled. Like this, and it's going to be set to the initial parameter. So at the beginning, it's gonna enable is going to be false, and then we can set it to on when we have turned it on, when we toggle the toggle switch. Now we're gonna have a use effect here, and our use effect is gonna watch our force on parameter, and when that is turned true, then we're gonna set enable to true, because when force on is true, then we want it to be to the toggle switch to be on when we reload. So then we just need to pass this force on like this. Okay, so now the use effect is done, and now we can move on to a function called handle toggle, and this is going to be what happens when you press on the toggle switch. Now we're gonna check if the button or the toggle switch rather is disabled or have force on, like if it should stay on and it cannot be changed by pressing it. And then we're just gonna return. If we should change it, then we're gonna create a new state, which is gonna be the opposite of what it was. So if it was on, this is gonna be off. If it was off, it's gonna be on. And then we're gonna set enabled to this new state. So we're gonna flip it. And then we're gonna check if on toggle, then we're gonna on toggle with the new state. So this is going to allow us to flip the toggle switch. And that is it for functions. So now we're just going to return our elements. So first we're going to create a label like this with some class names of flex column, items center, gap of 1, cursor pointer, and select none. And this is going to stack the switch and label vertically. It's going to center the items horizontally. It's going to make a small gap between the switch and the label. It's going to change the cursor to a pointer, and it will prevent the text selection on click. With this label done, inside it we're going to have a motion div with on click of handle toggle. We don't need this parameter here, or this parenthesis rather. And then we're going to have a while tap, and we're going to set the scale to disabled. We're going to set the scale depending on if disabled or force on is on. Now if they are, we're going to just keep it, and if they are off, then we're going to scale it down a bit. Then we need some classes. We're going to have some relative with 12, height 6, rounded, full, flex, item center, some padding. On focus, we're going to have an outline of none. We're also going to have focus visible and focus visible ring blue 400. And this is going to do that it will show a blue ring when the switch is focused via keyboard. Yeah, and then we also need transition, colors, and duration 300, which will ensure smooth transitions when the background color changes from gray to blue, or the other way around. We also need some more here. Sorry, we're not finished. There's a lot of classes. Then we go into check. So we need to change these to these guys like this, and we need to check if enabled. And if it is, then we're going to set the background to a blue, and if it's not, it's going to be a gray color like this. And I see what's wrong here. We need to have one of these like this. Okay, so if it's enabled or not, we're going to set the background to blue or gray. And then we're also going to check if it is disabled or have force on. If it does have any of those, we're going to set its opacity to be 50%, and we are not going to allow it to be clicked or hovered. It's going to show a different mouse event, like a stop sign. And we're going to have a cursor or pointer. So like this, and now we are done with the classes finally. Now we're going to need a role for screen readers to know what it is, and it's going to be a switch. We're going to have an area checked of enabled, and this will tell screen readers whether the switch is currently on or off. We are going to need an area label for this. We're just going to set it to the label, and then a tab index of 0. And we're also going to have an on key down, and we're going to check it with a event here, key event like this. And inside here, we're going to check if this key was, e.key is the enter button, or if it is the space button, and if disabled and force on is not on. If they press enter or the space and disabled or force on is not on, then we're going to prevent default. We're going to handle toggle. So if the user presses enter or space while focused, it will prevent the default scroll and submit behavior, and it's just going to call handle toggle like a click. And this is only going to work if it's not disabled or forced on. Yeah, so now we're done with this. Here, so we can actually close it up. Yeah, like this. And now we need another div with some animations. And this is going to move the ball of the switch either left or right, depending on if it's enabled or not. Then we're going to have a transition for the ball moving, which is going to be the type of spring. So it's springy. We're going to have a stiffness of 500 and a damping of 30 like this. And we're going to have some styling on this as well with a set width and height. And it's going to have a white background and it's going to be completely rounded and with a drop shadow. Yeah, so that's the div, and outside of this div we will also create a span element with some text sizing depending on the screen size, and some bold text, and the text is going to be a gray color. And inside here we are going to have our label text like this, and now we can just export this like this, and then I can just format it so it looks a bit nicer. And this is the toggle switch. And now we just need to modify our environment variable to get some Keycloak information on there, so that we can use now when we move on to the more authentication process of this. So inside our .env.local file, currently we only have the API URL, but we're gonna need some more, so I'm just gonna copy this in. And what we need now is our base URL, which is just gonna be our Keycloak port 8080. Our realm is demo realm, client, gateway client, and our redirect URI is going to be to our front end with localhost 5173. So just copy this in or write it yourself, and then you're ready to continue. Okay, so with this done, we can now continue on with creating another util file. And this is going to be for our authentication process. So I'm just going to call it auth.js. Now, this is not going to be a big util file. It's going to be pretty small. So we're just going to define a function here, get roles from token. And this, just like the name says, is going to allow us to extract a realm role from our authentication token. Like this. First, we're just going to do a basic check if the token is defined. And if it's not, we're just going to return an empty array. Then we're going to do a try catch because something can go wrong here. And we're going to extract the payload from the JWT token. Now, a JWT token or JSON web token is divided by a header, payload, and signature. And they are divided by a dot. So the first part is going to be the header, the middle part is going to be the payload, and the last part is going to be the signature. And we are only interested in the payload here because it's going to provide us with the information about the user and its roles. So we're going to have to split this token by dots, and what we want is the second part, so at index 1. Now we're going to return this payload if it has a realm role, or we're going to just return an empty array again, like that. And then we need a catch with an error here, and then we're just gonna console log it so that we can see it. Error decoding token with our error, and we're gonna return again an empty array. So here we're just going to extract the realm role from the authentication token, and we are going to use this later on in our line generator. Great. Now with this done, we can configure our app's entry point, and that is going to be the main.jsx. And what we're going to do is that we're going to import, and it's called auth provider, and this is going to be from React OIDC contexts, like this. And now we need to configure our OIDC configurations that we're going to use in our app. And I'm just going to copy this in because I'm lazy. So I'm going to take all of this like this. Let's see, and I'm going to explain it pretty shortly. So first of all, we have authority. And this is the URL of the Keycloak's endpoint, you can say. So we're going to first take the base URL, which points at 8080, and then /realm and our realm name. Then we need our client ID, and we get this from the environment file as well. A redirect URI is going to point to our front end. The same for our post logout redirect URI. Then we have response type code, and that's because we use the authorization code flow. Then we have a scope OpenID profile email, and it's just for basic information about the user, like its email and profile information and stuff. And then we have our PKCE method, and that stands for proof key for code exchange. So, and we are just going to use SHA-256, and this is for extra security because it prevents token interception attacks. So, and then on sign-in callback, so this is after we have logged in, then we will get a lot of params in our URL, and I think that looks ugly, so I wanted to remove it. So we're just going to replace it, so it's just localhost 5173 again. So that's what this does. And now the only thing we really need to do down here is that we need to surround our app with this auth provider. Sorry, not 3, and then authz config like this. And we're going to wrap this around our app to be able to store the authentication information. So like this, and now our entry point is also done. Now we can actually move out a second part of code from our line generator. And we are going to take this code, first of all, from our line generator component here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new utils file. And this is going to be called useQuote.js. We can just paste this in here like this. And then we're also going to need a second part, and it's this fetch random line function. So we're just going to take that. I'm going to also paste it inside here. And now we can modify this a bit. So I'm going to format so it doesn't look so bad. And now we can work on updating our useQuote util here. So first of all, we're going to have to import some stuff. We are going to import useState and use callback from React. Callback from React like this. And use callback is a React hook that makes it possible so that on every re-render of this hook, we don't have to re-render our function. So this is just going to keep in memory, so it doesn't have to re-render every time. And we also need to import the get roles from token, which we defined earlier in our auth util file. Now we need the actual function here, export useQuote, and it's going to take two parameters, API URL and a user parameter like this. And now we can move this inside of here, and also the fetch random line we can move inside like this. And we are going to add the use callback to our fetch random line function. It looks like this. And we're going to keep this, but we're also going to check the roles now. So we're going to find roles, and we're going to call the function get roles from token, which we defined. And we're going to check if we have a user and it has an access token like this. Then we're going to check if the roles that this user has includes the role paid, which we defined in our Keycloak realm. If it doesn't, then we're going to set an error text of you must have a paid subscription to access this feature like this. And this was the text that you saw in the beginning when I showed what would happen if the user didn't have permission to use our service. So this is going to come up on the card instead of a quote if it doesn't have the paid role. And we're going to set loading to false because we have set our error instead. And then we're going to return. Now if it has the role, then we can continue with this call to our API. So we are only going to call our API if the user has the paid role. This is correct. We don't need to change anything. Let's see. No. And we are done here. The only thing we need to add is we need to pass in the API URL and the user like this. And we should also return our quote state variable, our loading state variable, our error state variable, and the function itself like this. So now this is done and we can format it. And now the only thing that's really left is to modify our line generator, and then we can test it. This is going to be quite a lot, so we will take it step by step. Now, as you can see, there are a lot of, or some rather, imports we no longer need. So we can remove these imports, but we're going to add some more now because we have moved out a lot of components and utils. Import, the first one that we're going to import is use auth. This is from our React -oidc -context. We're also going to import our toggle switch component. We're also going to import our use quote util and our get gradient for quote. And the last one we need is import get scale. Get scale for quote from utils code scaling like this. So now we have imported what we need, and now we can continue on. So the next part that we're going to need inside of this line generator is some state variables. So we are going to have a boolean that is going to check if the user is authenticated. It's going to have a user with the user information. We're going to check if it's loading. Sorry, it's going to be small. Signing redirect and sign out redirect. We're just going to hold the URLs, I think. And these are going to be use auth like this, and we need brackets. So this authenticated is going to be true if we have logged in. The user is going to hold token information, which we use in the use quote hook. Is loading shows whether the auth is still initializing. Sign in redirect and sign out redirect is a helper function that we're going to use for login and logout. Now we are also going to need another one, which is going to be quote, loading, error, and fetch random line, which we are all going to get from our use quote hook that we defined earlier. I'm going to pass in our API URL and our user like this. And we're also going to add an enable login toggle, which we're going to track with a state variable. So with this, we're going to check if we are allowed to log in or not. And that will be depending on the toggle switch. So we are going to we're going to get what we have stored in local storage, which we're gonna do later if we are allowed or not to log in based on what the toggle for the enable login is. Like this, and it's going to default to false unless the user has turned it on before. So that is that. Now we also need some functions to handle if we should log in or out. So I'm going to define it here, handle login logout function like this. And we're going to check if is authenticated is true, then we have already logged in. And then we're going to call sign out redirect, which is going to sign us out. And else, if we are not logged in, then we're going to call sign in redirect to sign us in. Great. Handle click we're going to keep as it is. Now we have our scale here, but we also need to get our gradient now because we moved it out to a different file. So we're going to define our gradient as get gradient for quote, and we're going to pass in our quote. So that's great. Now we have everything we need, and now we just need to update our return. Now the first thing we're going to add is our toggle switch, and it's going to be just outside our main here. So we are going to create a div with some class names of position absolute, and it's going to be in the top left corner like this. Inside here we're going to add our toggle switch component, and we're going to set its on toggle to be, let's see, like this state variable, and we're going to set if we are allowed to log in or not based on the state, and we're going to also store it in local storage with the same name as we used earlier, login toggle, and we're going to set the state. So we're going to save in local storage what the state is of the toggle, and then we're going to set a label to enable login like this. We're going to set disabled to be initially false. We're going to set force on to depend on if we are logged in or not. And we're going to set initial to allow login. So initially we're going to allow login. We are going to be able to press the toggle switch, and it's going to force it on if we are logged in, because if we're logged in, we can't turn off the option to log in or out because we are already logged in and we can only log out now. So that is the toggle switch component. Now we should also add our login button. So we're going to create another div here with some class names of position absolute, top, and now right. So this is going to be in the top right corner. Inside here, we're going to have a regular button with the on click of handle login logout function. And we are going to set disabled, and we're going to check if is loading is on, or we are not allowed to log in and we are not already logged in. So if we're not already logged in and we're not allowed to log in either, or it's the auth process is still loading, then it's going to be set to disabled, or otherwise it's going to be false. So it's not going to be disabled otherwise. Nice. And now we're going to have some class names, and we're going to have it like this and this. And inside here, we're going to set some padding. We are going to make it rounded. We're going to have some white text, some semi-bold font, some transition colors. Now check if is authenticated is true or not. Let's see, like this. And if it's true, if we are logged in, then the button is going to turn red, and on hover, it's going to turn a darker red like this. I'm going to do this. And if not, we are going to check if we are allowed to log in or not. And if we are allowed to log in, we're going to set the background to a blue and hover effect of making the background a little darker blue. Or if we are not allowed to log in, sorry, like this, we are going to set the background to a gray and cursor of not allowed. So what this means is if we are already logged in, then the button is going to be red and it's going to, then it's going to be red. If we're not logged in and we are allowed to log in, then it's going to be blue. And if we are not logged in and we're not allowed to log in, then it's going to be gray. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. So now we need to close this up like this. I already had it, sorry. And now we need to have what we should have inside the button. And now we're going to check if it's loading. If it is loading, then we are just going to set it to ... the button. And then we're going to check if it is not loading, then we're going to check if it's authenticated, if we have logged in. If we have logged in, the text is going to be log out. If we have not logged in, then it's going to be login. So that's our button done. And now with that finished, we are actually done here. We're done with the line generator and everything else. So now we can actually test it. Okay, so I tested to build this and run it, and I found two issues that I had accidentally put in. So the first one is inside the toggle switch for the enabled state variables. It should be regular brackets, not curly brackets. So that's the first issue. And then the second issue inside the gradients util file, and I had accidentally a semicolon inside here. So I just move it out. So with that done, now we can hopefully do npm run build to see if we have any other issues. Let's see here. It looks like it's going to be fine. Yeah, then we can do npm run dev and we can navigate to the localhost. And let's see, here we are. Now we have this enable login that we can toggle on or off. And if it's off, then we can't log in. Let's see, and then we can log in. So first I'm going to log into the free account, which doesn't have the paid role. And then when we try to use it, you must have a paid subscription to access this feature. So we're not allowed to use it. And now we can't turn off login mode because we're already logged in. Now if we log in as the paid user and we try to use it, we are allowed. So this is basically it. Now the last part that I want to add to this is if we don't have a login enabled, I want to be still able to use this feature because this is like a demo and this is like if you want to have it authenticated or not. So right now we can't use the feature because we aren't logged in with the correct role. So we're going to have to change that, but other than that we are done. Okay, so to fix this issue with that we want to be able to use the service if we not have the authentication mode toggled, then we need to fix in two files. The first one we're going to fix in is the use quote file, and we're going to just add another parameter here. And we're going to check if the login is enabled or not. Now, the next thing we're going to do is before we check for roles, we're going to do an if statement, and we're going to check if our login enabled, if it is enabled or not. If the toggle switch is enabled, then we want to use the authentication mode. So then we want to check for roles. And if the toggle switch is not on, then we just want to call the API directly, not having to check for roles. So that is that, and we also need to add this login enabled variable here. Now we are done in use quote, and we also need to update the line generator. We need to move this to happen before, because we need the allow login variable that we're going to pass to the use quote. So allow login like this. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we are actually done here. Yeah, so now we can test it. So right now it should work without the auth mode. Yeah, it does. So now we can use it. If we enable it, yeah, I forgot something. I was just thinking about that. Now it doesn't clear. So we are going to have to update in use quote. I forgot. And inside this role check, we also need to set the quote to null like this. So now it should work better. So I'm going to refresh. If we don't have auth mode enabled, we can use it just fine. If we enable it, we won't be able to use it unless we have the paid role. So we're going to log in to our free user. You cannot use it and you cannot turn it off because you're logged in. Then we're going to log in as our paid, and now we can use it. And if we refresh, we are still logged in, You're still able to use it, and the enable login is still on. So yeah, so that was the Office project. I had a lot of fun creating this project. And if you would like to see more from this channel, then please leave a comment with some requests on what I should build next. So thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.